and a very warm welcome on behalf of the European Forest Coalition and FAM to this event on Building the Bioeconomy Together, Forest Biomass for a Sustainable Future, as we consider what is the best use of European biomass as demand continues to rise, and how can supply be increased while supporting future growth, protecting biodiversity, and helping to fuel the next generation of biotechnology companies and industries. In a nutshell, what kind of European enabling policies are needed to make Europe an industrial leader while achieving the EU's climate goals? And are we on the right track? That is what I will be discussing today through a series of entirely interactive sessions. My name is Jackie Davis, and I'm delighted to be moderating this event this morning. There will be an opportunity during the panel discussion later for you to ask questions. If you would like to do so in the interests of effective time management, we're going to ask you please to write your questions. There is a QR code. It's on your badge. It's on the screen now, and it will be on the screen again at the beginning of the panel session. So if you have a question, my only plea is please don't write me small essays, something nice, short, that I can read quickly and pass on to our panel. And if you want to share what you are hearing at this event via social media, and we do encourage you to get that forestry message out, we would suggest using the hashtag Building the Bioeconomy Together. So that's it by way of introduction. We're going to start this morning with what we're calling a fireside chat. I don't have a fireside, but we have a forest. So let us call it a gathering in the forest instead. And I am delighted to welcome Alexandre Paquot, Director of the European Commission's Directorate General for Climate Action, better known to us in Brussels as CLIMA, and Håkan Buskhe, CEO of FAM. FAM is owned by the three largest Wallenberg foundations and is itself the owner of innovative companies, including two forestry companies with land in Finland, Sweden, Estonia, and Romania. So we have the policy perspective and the industry perspective as we discuss here the strategic role of the European bioeconomy. This is a fairly short session, so no time for audience questions here. But as I say, during the panel later, you'll have a chance to ask some. Alexandre, thank you so much for being with us today. And let's start by setting the scene, if you like, in terms of how the Commission sees the role of Europe's forests, of biomass in the bioeconomy, not just in terms of climate neutrality and circular economy goals, but also that crucial central issue now in Brussels, driving competitiveness and strategic autonomy. Where does it sit in that landscape?
You said it all already. Well, first, a big thank you for inviting me. I think it's a great event. It's an important day for climate action today. On the other side of the street, the Council hopefully will decide the European climate law, setting a target for 2040 and get ready for the Belém COP. So I think we cross fingers that things will go right. And what I can tell you is that what you were saying about the importance of the land sector as a very strategic sector for Europe is very much at the core of the political discussion at the other side of the street, because we know that to move towards climate neutrality, we need, of course, a strong economy, we need competitiveness, but we need also forests. We need forests that can really drive solutions for the future. So we want to move towards a fossil fuel economy. Very fine. I think we all want that. But it will not be a future without carbon. And the future of carbon will be the carbon that the forests can produce. So biogenic carbon will be so critical for the future. So it is a strategic asset for Europe. We need to preserve it, but we need also to make sure that we bring solutions across the value chain. But I'm sure we will get back to that in a minute.
Indeed, like to talk about that in a moment. As you say, great to be having this conversation today of all days, while environment ministers are discussing
climate ministers.
Climate
okay.
ministers.
And they often are also
Indeed.
environment ministers.
So, a very strategic sector, a strategic asset. Håkan, from your perspective, from an industry side, the role of biomass, presumably you would endorse everything Alexandre has said, but can you also give us a sense of how demand for both primary and secondary biomass is likely to evolve, and then we can consider some of the implications of that?
I think it's important to know, and people sitting in this room know how to really take care of the forest, and the perspective when you're a forest owner is not a quarter or 1 year, it's probably 50 to 100 years. So it's a total different time schedule compared to other businesses. We are also in other businesses. And so what we do today, we will benefit 50 to 100 years. And what we can harvest today, someone planted a tree 50 to 100 years ago. It's an untapped potential. We have in the Nordic really built our welfare through forestry and other things. And I think that's an also untapped possibility also in other countries around Europe with re-establishing forests, but also utilizing the forestry in the best way, because it's not just growing trees and use them for something. I mean, if you can build something that lasts long time, we will capture in CO2 and that's what we try to do when we do our forest and building our forestry to really go for the best tree for building material and other things. And then to be able to do that, we do other things like pulp, but also packaging material. And to do that, you need a virgin fiber to be able to recycling things. Normally, you can recycle things up to 8 to 10 times. And to build packaging material and other things that could be recycled is an extremely important part. And that we can do much more also in the rest of Europe. But I believe also in the industry today, having and bearing in mind that we need to increase our efficiency in Europe to be competitive. It's important that we see the potential, but that we also have the same preconditions. Today we have.
Can we come to that in a moment? Just because I just want to continue really to set the scene and what those preconditions would look like in a moment. But just from an industry perspective, we like to talk about competitiveness and green going hand in hand. That it's not one or the other. It can be a win-win. When we talk about biomass, and particularly that increasing demand for biomass in order to play that role that you've both talked about, do you believe that it is compatible so that industry can use biomass and be competitive using it and comply with the EU's climate goals? Is it an either or is it a win-win if we get it right? And then we'll talk about what getting it right looks like.
No, but I think we can, but it also needs to be something you can plan for. And we need to understand what type of, again, preconditions that we have to be able to do that, and we don't change the legislation. And it's not just the central legislation in Brussels, it's also local legislation. But I think we can do much more. We can build more on biomass and bioeconomy. By the way, the definition of bioeconomy is not really set yet, you know that. But if we assume that we're utilizing the earth in the best way and what is growing from there. But I think that's possible. When it comes to our other industries, if I just take 5 seconds around that, we are into bearings and whatever, and building motors or with ABB. I think all our companies within the Wallenberg Square have already signed off the Paris Agreement. So we have passed that already and see that as a good thing for our business. Utilizing the forest, because if we're utilizing the forest, then we can also capture CO2. If it stands there forever, it will emit CO2. So we need to be good at that and utilize it in the best way. And then I think we can be competitive.
Thank you very much. Same question to you, Alexandre. And also, in terms of that supply and demand issue, how do we ensure that there's enough sustainable biomass and that it remains, so it's available, but it's also affordable for EU industries so we can realize the full benefits of this, what you called a strategic asset. How do you see getting that right?
Yeah, first, I fully agree with you, Håkan. I think we need to have stability also and long-term vision in order to be able to invest as best as we can in our assets. Here we talk about forests, but there are other very important assets in Europe. But having this long-term predictability is critical. This is why what is happening again in the Council today is so essential, so important. Coming back to the question of availability of biomass, I think also we have to recognize forests are facing the effect of climate change very much. So this is a sector that needs to be resilient and healthy. So having resilient and healthy forests should be really our objective. And I'm very much with you as well to say that we need to find ways to store the carbon, but also create the ways to provide input to other parts of the society that needs the carbon that I was talking about. So for us, the vision we have is very much healthy soil, healthy forests, resilient, that can, across value chain, store the carbon as long as possible and use it at the end of its life, let's call it like that. This is why for us, having a value chain approach is so important, and I would be happy to hear your point of view on that, because we need to look at the carbon being stored in the forest, but also in the products of the forest, and also at the end being able to store the carbon in bio-CCS, for instance, or use the carbon for the feedstock for industry, for the chemical sector. So really looking at the whole value chain. And this is the way we look at it. We're not looking at forests in isolation. No. We really want to look at it as the whole value chain. And this is where the solutions can be found. This is where the incentives can be found and investment at the end can be found. Because to make healthy forests, that costs.
Agree.
Yeah, Håkan, a reaction to that?
No, but I agree. And if we start with the climate change, and we see that on our forest already today, where the different borders of where you have different growth areas is moving to the north, and also the impact on species that have an impact on the forest, bugs and other things. So that is a key thing for us. So when we plant trees today, if we harvest one tree, we plant at least 3 trees or plants. And those needs to stand for another 100 years. So I think that's a key thing for the industry really to work on that. At the same time, it's a little bit like the chicken or the egg. If you look at the building industry, everyone is claiming it's easier and faster to build in concrete and steel. So then you need to find new solutions, for example, how to increase the efficiency building with, well, timber and other things. And we have put money into that. There are some other colleagues from Austria where we have fully automated the way of building residential houses, and in a very sustainable way to have a lower cost than in concrete. So there are different things that we need to do. We can't just sit back and saying, well, it's the politicians' fault all the time. We can't do that and that. But we are doing things to show that we can utilize the tree fiber, the biomass, in a much better way. And then also when it comes to recycling of packaging material and things like that, could be more. I think we can put more emphasis in to be much more clearer on that, how we utilize the tree fiber. And also in the chemicals, of course. Our pulp mills today is not a pulp mill, it's more a refinery for different type of products, products that could be utilized for chemistry and other things. So we need also to develop, but I think then you need a precondition to build something new. It costs us 1.5 billion each and every time we do something, and it should be there for 50 years. So I think these are the things. And
those preconditions that drive the investment that we need, what for you is absolutely crucial? I know as a coalition, you've talked about, and it's the buzzword in this town at the moment, streamlining, simplifying the rules and other things. What for you is absolutely crucial to make the business case for driving those investments?
I think,
and then to you, Alexandre.
especially when it comes to the forest industry, most of our products find their home within EU, at least 75%. Then it's, of course, a little bit disturbing as we have it right now when Chinese are flooding the market with different type of products, and they don't have the same rules and regulation for harvesting and things like that. Today we have equal to 500,000 tons of packaging material coming in to a cost that we can't even produce for. And of course, then you start to wonder, should we then invest in new things then? So I think we need to see the full picture, what we would like to do. It's everything from production, harvesting. It's a question of long-term regulations, creating more value as an industry that we need to do. But also, we can't be naive if we would like to protect the earth with our own values that we believe in, to import things from other places that have totally different rules.
Indeed. Alexandre, I'm going to talk to our panel later on as well about what lessons we draw from past initiatives that have impacted on this sector and what we can expect from future initiatives coming up. But in broad terms for you, in terms of creating those preconditions that Håkan is talking about and really, making that business case to drive investment, what for you is crucial? And do you think we are coherent enough at the moment in our approach?
Probably we can improve in the coherence, I'm sure. But if I can say something about creating a business case, because this is true for your industry, but it's true across the board. We are now moving in the climate action in a field where investments are huge. We talk, as you said, about 100 millions, billions of euros of investment. And CEOs, boards will not sign an investment before they have a business case.
No.
So having a market-based approach for us is very important. And this is also why we think that giving a value to the carbon that is stored in the forest, in the product used after or stored, is so essential. Yeah. And with the carbon, we have a unit. And with this unit, we can create a value to be able to make the investment that you're looking for. And this is why the work we do on the carbon removal and carbon farming framework is so important, because with these methodologies for afforestation, for improved forest management, we will be able to create this currency, this carbon value that can then be put in the market, in the voluntary carbon market, looking at how to incentivize action on the ground. And this is at the end what we really want. And I'm very impressed by the innovation that is happening in the sector. Yeah. You were mentioning the timber, the cross-laminated timbers. I mean, these are very good stuff. This is good solution, good innovation. But we need to make sure that this has a business case, that at the end companies invest in that. This is what we are looking at. This is what drives us basically in our policy discussions in DG CLIMA.
Thank you. We are almost out of time for this conversation. We'll come back on many of these issues later in the session. But I just wanted to ask each of you, and perhaps this time, Alexandre, start with you, and then Håkan, a final word. And I wanted to ask you about, of all the things we've talked about, a key next step, rather than saying a top priority, because I think you would say there are many things we need to do, and you've touched on many of them. But if we are, as we look to the raft of upcoming initiatives, and to say, okay, a key next step for policymakers, but also for industry. So if I can put it this way, what do you see as your next task, and what do you want from him? And if I can put it the other way around, Håkan, what do you see as the industry's next task, and what do you want from Alexandre? A couple of minutes each, max.
It's easier to say what we can do, but I can tell you very frankly, what we will do next is a more solid MRV system. MRV stands for Monitoring, Reporting, Verification. We need to get the data right, because what drives, again, investments is certainty, is making sure that when you take action, you get results, and that you can monitor all of that. And I think we need to be better in this MRV. We are working very hard on that. And these methodologies that we are working on as part of the CRCF is one element.
Anything you want from him?
I want to cooperate with you. No, sure. I want to listen to your needs. No. And if you can be very concrete in what will again drive business case for these large investments and make the forest more resilient, I think that's what I would like.
I think what we need as an industry is to be very innovative moving forward, because that's the only way of competing. The other thing I think it's important to understand when it comes to forestry, I represent companies who own enormous lot of land, nearly 3% of the Swedish soil, but most of the forest owners are small. Yeah. And the burden for those small forest owners are so enormous to cope with new regulations and try to understand it. I remember last year we had a guy here from Germany who had a small forest land that he didn't really understand how to utilize it because there were so many different legislations. And we need to understand that's the case, that it's not just big enterprise like us owning millions of hectares of land that maybe can cope with it, but most of the forest owners are small, and we are dependent on those small forest owners to be able to develop this industry.
What do you want from me?
Yeah, from you is to understand that the legislation needs.
No, I just want to. I'm interested.
But the legislation needs to be understandable and be able to handle without a huge organization.
I agree. I think we are getting too complex, so I agree.
Indeed, and that point you make there, Håkan, at the end as well about the diversity of forestry across the EU, diversity in terms of, and you talked about climate change and how in some areas of Europe, obviously in the Mediterranean, huge impacts of climate change. In others, different management structures, different sizes of enterprise. All of these issues, which leads to that concern about any attempt to be one size fits all. Again, something we will come back on in our discussions later.
Thank you.
But will you join me in thanking Alexandre and Håkan very much for a great start to our conversation this morning.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. Thank you. So now I'm going to come out amongst you all because I wanted to hear from some members of the European Forest Coalition and wanted to talk to them about, as we talk about this issue of supply and demand and this rising demand for biomass, what is the best use of biomass? How do we use the best possible combination of different uses to get this right? And we want to go, we talked about a value chain approach there, underlining how important that was, Alexandre, in his remarks, wanted to take you a bit along that value chain, from the forest to the sawmill, through industry, through innovation, and that crucial issue Håkan mentioned about recycling. So to do this, I'm going to talk to a few members of the coalition, and I have a question for each of them. I've asked them not to come up on the stage. I'm going to move among you. So first, where is Bertrand? He is here. Bertrand Servois, Secretary General of UCFF, the Union de la Coopération Forestière Française. I have a mic, sir, for you. Thank you very much. And really, I just wanted to ask you, when we talk about forest management and effective forest management and wood supply, how can you ensure the best supply of biomass and the best use?
The sustainable forest management by forest owners, supported by competent professionals, ensures the best use of biomass. For that is essential to motivate and train them in order to produce high-quality trees and wood, show them climate change and its consequences, support them through skilled employees and service providers, ensure a variety of industries for different wood uses. Roles of cooperatives, I am cooperative, bring together forest owners within a healthy, sustainable, and democratic organization. Share experiences with the cooperative and among cooperatives. Secure competitive wood supply for industries through supply contracts. Addressing climate change. It's necessary in response to the decline of many trees, implementation of technical experiments and sharing of results to key forest stakeholders, consideration of the environmental impacts on soils and biodiversity, support efforts to decarbonize the economy. And on the political level, we call for clear guidance from the EU in favor of dynamic and responsible forest management. Okay. Our coalition is a key asset in achieving this goal.
Thank you very much indeed, Bertrand. Where is Dieter Lechner? At the back here. Dieter, in terms of, we were talking in that session about innovation and innovative uses of biomass. When it comes to the more traditional sectors, such as construction, what are the key benefits and how do you see that evolving?
Yes, Thank you very much. I'm very happy with the comment of the Commission that CLT is a very good stuff and we have to develop it further. We fully support this. So we have a lot of very good products in construction, like furniture and other products, the beams and the high-rise buildings, where we have shown that we can defossilate, the construction industries. As you know, construction industries amounts up to 35% of all emissions, and there was a recent study performed in Austria and in the Netherlands where they said that if the construction industries continues like this from 2023 to 2050, it will amount up to 440 gigatons of CO2 emissions, which is exactly the same than the CO2 equivalent that we have to keep the 1.5 degree target. So that means these institutes call for a revolution in the construction industries, and we have this revolution. We can really use timber products on the one hand side and even store the carbon that is so to say, included in the timber products in the buildings. We can build even a second city in cities by using timber products. So thus we have asked to the Commission, we know the solutions. You have confessed what we can do with timber products. Even recently there was a presentation of the DG Grow where they said bio-based products offer a good opportunity to decarbonize construction industries. But what we ask from Commission is, how do we do it? What do you really envisage from us that we can help you to really go for it? To only confess that we can decarbonize construction is one issue, but we need a clear guidance. How do we do it in the future? And in this respect, I also want to say that we continue with to prolong products on secondary level also, and we are ready for this discussion also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it is an issue we'll come back to in our panel. But now I'm turning to Kaisu Karvala, head of the Finnish Forest Industries Federation office here in Brussels, and we talked about traditional sectors. When we talk about innovating and innovative uses of biomass. Kaisu, for you, can you give us a couple of examples of what we're talking about here?
Well, we had the fantastic talk of the Commission and the CEO. Listen, Finland, we have 75% of our land is covered by forests. So if we don't innovate, we will not be here tomorrow if we don't take care of our forests. So what our people do, that we actually live already in an integrated bioeconomy value chain, if you wish. We are living pretty much in the forests, but we have the sawmills side, we have the pulp, we have the refineries, and then we have this amazing innovation. And I would say that we talk already about revolution, not evolution, being it plastics, being it tissues, being it lignin, which is a polymer coming from wood, which you can use for batteries, for glue. We can have fillers for tires. And this is really the core, is that we can bypass, we can actually be the solution, the European solution, to be the non-fossil material. And we are always taking new life with the wood. Like I usually often say that our wood is, or tree is like a pork,
like a
pig.
A pig.
We use all of it, but our forests, our pigs are just burning all the time. So a stupid example, but saying that we use everything we can and in a sustainable and circular way of our forests. 95% of our side streams are already being used in materials that I mentioned, and our companies are investing heavily in the new innovations. So if we want to keep up the competitiveness in Europe and be an industry that matters, we have to be believed by the Commission. We're so thrilled to have you here.
I was going to ask if you wanted to add, or Dieter was his request to the Commission, if you had a request. Is it about that recognising your positive role? Is it about...
I think let's talk about us also as an industry. We want to be part of the industrial dialogue, not just to be a side stream or just be sort of the lungs of Europe. We have to take care of our forests, but we really have to make huge investments also, and that's why we need also the solid regulatory framework, which nowadays seems to be somewhat changing every day. I'm not going to talk about EUDR, but
I think it's going to come up in our panel, and you did.
Yeah. No, but great work, and we want to be at the talk of the town, and we want to be here to help and support.
And that
build.
dialogue, so Alexandre saying, I want to hear from you, I want to work with you on these issues, that's really important for you.
Every time I can come to your place every day. No worries.
That's a threat. No, I think that's a threat, not a promise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, guys. And we will, as I say, come back on that issue of the solid regulatory framework. What does it look like? What do we learn from experiences like the deforestry regulation and where we are with that? What do we learn from land use change and forestry regulation? So as we go forward, what can we learn from the past, as it were, so we make sure we get it right? Let me turn now to Arthur Bokunt. Where are you, Arthur? I've lost you. There you are. Yes, it's like pantomime. Behind you, please. And Arthur is CEO of the Latvian Forest Industry Federation. Please, in terms of the best use of biomass, which is what we're focusing on in this session. And when we talk about the risk that demand will very much outstrip supply, if it does, if we don't have enough, what are the best uses of biomass?
Well, that's an interesting question, that we will have such good markets and every house in Europe will be built from woods, and we really lack wood biomass. As we know, most of forested countries can easily rise the availability of wood 20-30% by using infrastructure we have now and wood technology and workforce we have now, without raising any red flags on sustainability issues. That's a scenario that I'm not sure that we will have. But if it happens, we must understand that there will be different needs for different parts of Europe. One will strive for the wood usage in long-lasting products, and also Latvia will do that. But for example, our number one priority is security, and that includes security of energy. That will be our concern and our issue, and we will not buy anything from Russia. That's point one, and we will go out of fossil fuels, it's including gas and oil. And wood biomass will be one thing that we use as sustainable solution here. So different scenarios that we must understand that Europeans will implement there.
So again, reinforcing that message from the other side, we talked about no one size fits all in terms of different management structures, different geographies, and climate issues and so on, but also different needs. And for you, the strategic autonomy part of this piece is the most important. Thank you very much indeed, Artur. Henrik Velia. Where is Henrik? Oh, there you are. Everyone's right under my nose and I don't see them. Henrik, who is Managing Director at the Estonian Forest and Wood Industries Association. Henrik, from your perspective, I mentioned the land use change and forestry. I'm going to say from now on, LULUCF to have to avoid. Could come up with catchier titles for some of these regulations, just to save me, if nothing else. But Henrik, in terms of designing it, so we have talked about we're looking at a revision of it next year. How should it be designed if it really will incentivize that best use of biomass that we were talking about with Artur? What do you think is absolutely key here?
Well, I think a lot of good ideas and directions were already given in the previous chat. But if I may add on that, I think it's crucial that we find a way how to bring in the substitution effect into this LULUCF calculation, either directly or indirectly.
Just to be clear, what we're talking about here, that biomass products replace fossil fuel-based products.
Exactly,
yeah.
And how much we can save carbon through more efficient process and using renewable resource. And I think it's crucial because if we are only focusing on the lifetime of the product that we are producing, we are in danger of locking ourselves into these existing technologies in a way and not leaving room for innovation, because often the highest impact we can have is through innovative products that maybe have a shorter lifespan, but do have a high value added in terms of economical impact, and also have a high added impact through substitution effect. So leaving this flexibility is extremely important, and it can be done through the substitution effect, in my opinion.
Thank you. And Henrik has very kindly agreed to also join our panel, so we'll perhaps talk a little bit more about how you make sure you have that flexibility built in and get that balance right later on in our discussion. But I wanted to talk to one final member of the coalition today. We don't have them all with us, but we had the vast majority with us. In terms of predictability of supply, which is absolutely crucial. And we've talked a lot about long-term perspectives. Andrzej Kunzewicz, who is president of the Association of Foresters and Wood Technologists in Poland, in terms of a policy framework that really ensures we can have that long-term predictability of supply, what for you is key?
Well, spruce has almost fall down in a large part of Poland, and our basic species, which is Scotch pine, is also under threat. Designation of 2% of old-grown forest, which is in Polish condition 150,000 hectares, and creating 1,500 the nature reservation has impact, will have an impact for the supply. Predictability, on the one hand, should be easy because in Poland, our management, forest management is based on the 10 years harvest cycles. But reconstruction due to the climate change gives unpredictable biomass and making it very complicated.
Thank you very much indeed. So great to hear that. And I know Håkan has to run away from us and jump on a plane, I'm sure, Alexandre. But thank you. And thank you for staying to listen to every member of the coalition there, talking to you, all those who could be with us today. Lots of messages from you, lots of us, but we wish you best of luck. And let's see what happens. My colleagues are here. Oh, very good. Colleagues are here to listen to our discussion, and let's see what happens over the road today. And we will keep our fingers crossed for you that it goes well. So thank you all very much for that indeed. We're now going to return to a more traditional format in the sense of a panel debate, but very much we want to have here a conversation as we focus on. Håkan talked about those preconditions. He said we need to get the preconditions right if we are to realise the full potential of what Alexandre underlined is such a strategic asset for Europe. So in this session, we want to talk about the enabling policies for a sustainable and competitive European bioeconomy. What do we need to do to make sure we have the best possible conditions to ensure that sustainable use of biomass and a competitive industrial future? That word competitiveness running as a red thread through every discussion in Brussels at the moment. And does our panel believe that the EU is on the right track? Are we headed in the right direction broadly and we just need to tinker at the edges here and there? Or I think we talked about in terms of the use of biomass, I think it was Kaiser who said we're revolutionary, not evolutionary. Do we need to be revolutionary or evolutionary in terms of the policy environment? Just a reminder that for this session, you can ask questions. I'm asking you to do them in writing so that I can use them efficiently within our discussion. But let me introduce our panel and invite them to join me on the stage as I do so. Paulina Dejmek, very warm welcome to you, coming to us from the back there. Paulina is the head of the cabinet of the European Commissioner for Environment, Water Resilience and a Competitive Circular Economy, Jessika Roswall. Paulina, thank you very much. You can either jump over the forest or go round. Thank you. Come and sit next to me, Paulina. Thank you so much. Eric de Deckere, who is Director for Sustainability and Innovation at Cefic, the European Chemical Industry Council. We heard mention earlier of the chemical sector when we were talking about uses of biomass. Great to have you with us. Henrik Velja is coming back. Henrik from the Estonian Forest and Wood Industries Association. Please do come and make yourself comfortable. Delighted also to welcome Christoph Kultura, CEO of Haslaka Norica Timber, a family-run firm making innovative timber construction products. Great to have you, Christoph. And last but very much not least, Anu Korozuo, who is a researcher in the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. In keeping with the rest of this morning, no opening statements. We're just going to dive straight into the conversation. And if a question occurs to you, don't wait until the end. I like to weave your questions into my conversation with the panel. So please do use that QR code. It's on your badge as well if you have a question. So let us dive straight in. And I want to cut straight to the chase, Paulina, if I might, in terms of, we heard earlier, as you're probably aware from Alexandre Paquot, about where we are and how he described biomass as a vital strategic asset. And we talked about why it is, and we began to talk about what we need to do and what Håkan Buskhe from FAM called those preconditions to realize its full potential, because he said there's an enormous amount of untapped potential. I think it's not probably a fair question to ask you, is the EU on the right track? Because almost inevitably, I assume you would say, yes, it is. But in terms of the challenges, so if you think we're broadly, you're getting it right now, what are the challenges we now face if we can both put those two things together? I asked earlier, are they compatible? A sustainable use of biomass and a competitive industry. So can we be green and competitive at the same time? What do you see as the key challenges that you're trying to address?
I mean, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here for the previous session, but I had a quick, the 20 seconds summary whispered to me. So a few things here maybe. I mean, first of all, to say that what you were just mentioning, Jack, in terms of really seeing the bioeconomy in general as a really important element for Europe's competitiveness, sustainable competitiveness, but also placing that in the bigger geopolitical context in which we find ourselves. Clearly, we need to be much smarter with the use of our resources. That's why we're working a lot on circularity. The bioeconomy is not by definition circular, but it lends itself well to be circular because of the use of the natural and biological materials. So seeing the bioeconomy and, of course, by extension, biomass for what it is, a strategic resource for Europe, a homegrown resource, I think that's really, really important. And that's probably also where the conversation today is a little bit different compared to the conversation that we would have had already about the bioeconomy 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. And I think putting it also not only makes sense from an environmental perspective, makes sense from a carbon footprint perspective, but also putting it in this bigger context of the geopolitical challenges in which Europe finds itself. Now, are we getting it right? As you said, yes, what else could I say? But I do think that indeed what we want to do with the bioeconomy strategy we're putting forward in a few weeks' time, it's really to put bioeconomy where it belongs from our point of view, in this, environment, absolutely, but also as a strategic resource it is. The EU bioeconomy today around 5% of GDP, higher in the Nordic countries, enormous potential to become even higher. And I think that's a little bit also a bit of a positive agenda, a bit something where we say Europe is really good at this, we are innovators, we are in the global lead. Of course we can do more, of course we should do more, but really getting this bit more kind of positive agenda that we sometimes maybe are lacking these days. And then maybe a very final remark, how do we get this right? I think it's really about creating that enabling ecosystem. Part of that is, of course, funding, making sure that we can scale up some of the absolutely fascinating stuff that's happening in the research world. We look at biochemicals, we look at bioplastic, biopackaging and all the rest of it. So that's one bit, making sure that our companies can scale up, and it's, by the way, a challenge we have in general, not only limited to the bioeconomy, but also really harvesting the potential of the big, very successful bioeconomy sector, which we already have, the forest industry, and of course, many of you know that better than I do. So that's a little bit the two things, making sure that we really take advantage of the innovation which is there, make it possible for these companies to scale up, but at the same time, of course, also making sure that we have this enabling framework, the enabling ecosystem for all our actors out there.
Let's come back on that, if I might, a little bit later in the discussion. But let me turn to you, Eric, and as I say, and you heard the chemical industry already mentioned as an increasingly important user of biomass. Do you believe the EU is on the right track to enable the sector to play this role to the full, or do you think changes, whether revolutionary or evolutionary, are needed in the approach? And how do you see the challenge ahead?
Well, thanks a lot indeed for inviting us. And indeed, it was already mentioned. So the bio-based or bio-derived feedstock is quite important, also for the chemical industry as a downstream value chain, or as an upstream value chain in a lot of other value chains, but for the forestry. And if we look at, indeed, the goals of the chemical industry is also to be carbon neutral in 2050. And if you look at that long-term target, the models which we developed for it clearly show that there's an increased need for
biomass. So biomass is needed for materials. What we see in the policies that it is going the good direction, but there's certainly a need to support also biomass going into materials. Because if you look at indeed accounting rules, greenhouse gas accounting rules, if you look at indeed incentives, then biomass which goes into materials is less well awarded, which doesn't make it attractive if you produce biomass. So from that point of view, there is a need to support both incentives as well as the accounting rules to get indeed an award for biomass producers to go to feed it into materials. So I think that's an important element. We see some other legislation popping up, and I've seen in the brochure that you have found on your chair a lot of legislation mentioned. I think the Circular Economy Act, as mentioned, is a very crucial additional point linked to it. It's the bioeconomy strategy, but it's linked to each other. It are not different points. And that together, of course, with ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, but we can come back later on that.
Indeed.
But I think if you look at circularity and biomass, it plays a role. And if you look at our holistic vision on sustainable carbon cycles, then you see that indeed biomass is a crucial element of a circular ecosystem. So, and it's really for materials and not just for indeed using it as a fuel. I think Mr. Håkan also said it, it is indeed a long cycle to grow the forest. Indeed, so let's keep then the carbon which is stored there also in longer cycles.
Indeed.
In the system.
Indeed, lots to come back to in our discussion. Henrik, we talked very specifically about LULUCF earlier, but broadly now, more broadly, in terms of whether you believe the EU is on the right track or you see a need for change. And if you see a need for change, why? What are the challenges that we're not addressing effectively?
I think the big goal and kind of the long vision of EU is a good direction to be heading towards. I mean, nobody's against having a more sustainable society, climate neutrality, bioeconomy, etc. But what the challenge is with, unfortunately, many EU initiatives is how we're going to start implementing. We are inventing as we go, in a way, and inventing as you go means that there are often mistakes made or maybe taking a bit of a wrong path. Then the question is how fast are we able to correct the path and then turning back towards the right path. From the industry side, I find we feel that the kind of competitiveness and the economic part of the bioeconomy has really been left behind, and the focus has been in majority in the sustainability of the raw material base, but which has increased the cost for the industry and created destabilization. But then we need to, okay, we can handle the difficulties there if we get a stronger market, a competitive advantage on the market.
So going back to the question I was asking Håkan and Alexandre earlier, the two can go hand in hand, but you have to get it right. You have to get that balance right.
Definitely. It's a balancing act, and it's the balancing point is constantly shifting given what is going on in the bigger geopolitical context with competitors, etc. So always searching for the balancing point, and that means we need to correct quickly.
Thank you. And we'll come back on how to do that. And also, to your point about, you talked about inventing as we go, I do want to come back on this issue more broadly of what we learn, and somebody has already mentioned the deforestation regulation, lessons from that, lessons from LULUCF so far, etc. We'll come back on all of that a little bit later. But Christoph Kultura, from your perspective, what's your school report card on the EU? On the right track, could do better, or needs to rethink?
Well, I think we could do a lot better. Many things have been done right, but I think we really need to change a little bit the perspective. So if we really want to tackle climate change, the bioeconomy is the best means we have, because instead of releasing fossil carbon emissions, we can work in a circular economy using what the biomass gives us, and I don't think that that has been fully understood on the European level. We are the only industry that really has no carbon emissions during the processing process. So if you take a modern sawmill, for instance, we produce all the electricity, all the thermal heat we need for the process, and creating a product that further stores carbon. But yet we have to defend our sector against NGOs and a lot of people that understand the forest just as a carbon sink. But we know today that the carbon sink potential is, after 50, 60 years, is saturated. Only if we use products out of the forest and put it in a long-term use in materials, and that doesn't matter if they're, in chemicals, in building materials, then we can extend the potential of the carbon sink. And that is the main priority, but yet we really have to defend the use of forests, So what we truly need in Europe is more forest land in the future, and especially more productive forest land in terms of output of material. And if we achieve that, then we really can achieve the true sustainability, because true sustainability for me has to be sustainable in the ecological sense and also in the economical sense, because otherwise it is not long-term sustainable.
Which is also very much the mantra now of the European Commission, with that very strong focus on competitiveness, but also, as Paulina was referring to, that very strong focus on your role in strategic autonomy. Lots to come back to, but Anu, complete the picture in terms of your assessment of where we are and the challenge ahead. I'm not going to ask you if you think the Commission is on the right track. Again, as with Paulina, I would assume you would say that it is, but in terms of the challenge ahead.
First of all, many thanks for inviting me here. And listening to all the others, I have very little keywords to add. But what I wanted to reflect a bit more onto are basically what is behind these terms. We all know that bioeconomy is a very resource-intensive field. So in this respect, the circular economy, bringing that there is something that I believe is very much needed. And our recent assessments just show that of the biomass supply in Europe, when we consider all the biomass supplied, it's 82% comes from primary biomass. That means that it's directly from the natural resources. So only 18% overall is through either the byproducts or through recycling. And when we think of forest, that we all know and we've heard already, is one of the pioneers in reusing and taking stock of all these side streams. Even there, it's around 65% that is primary biomass that is being supplied. 35% that comes from the other. After the primary stage. And when we think of demand, I mean, almost 50% of all the biomass we eat, either directly as plant-based food or we feed to animals that we then eat. So that's 50% of all the biomass. So this is something that is still, it's quite an important part. But when we think of them, of course, forest products, we rarely eat. But even there, more than 50%, or actually it's almost 50-50 that goes to material, 50 goes to energy. And I believe here, this circularity, this rethinking, improving the value added for forest products, we do need to start thinking that much more carefully, because we cannot exploit, we have only one planet to live and use. So the biomass is a great asset in the sense that it does renew, and good forest management makes it renew even better and faster. But we need to really think of what to do with the biomass we extract.
Indeed, lots to talk about in our discussion. Paulina, I'm not going to ask you, is the bioeconomy strategy still on track for publication next week? Or they're going to ask you that. Is that the timing?
In any case, in the coming weeks, I would say.
In the coming weeks, and I'm not going to ask you to be very specific in terms of what we will see in any detail, but in a broad sense, and addressing some of these issues that our panel have already raised. Can you give us at least a sense of what we can expect? And then I want to ask each of you, and come in as and when you want to, in terms about those enabling conditions. And you talked about the ecosystem, the enabling ecosystem, and the scale up. And you've all raised different issues. But if we are to have a coherent roadmap for sustainable biomass, looking ahead to that 2050 target, what for you is crucial to address of the issues you've all highlighted? What do you want to see when this strategy comes out, when we get the Circular Economy Act next year? What will you be looking for in very broad terms? And then we can delve in some of the detail. But Paulina, first, in terms of broad lines on what we could expect.
No, thank you. And maybe also just, if I may, to pick up briefly on some of the comments that other colleagues have made as well. I think, first of all, where to place the bioeconomy strategy, and I think I tried to say that in my introductory remarks. We see it very much as part of the EU's competitiveness agenda. So very much in the context of what we set out to do in the competitiveness compass in the beginning of the year, the clean industrial deal, and of course, obviously also part of circularity. Clear link, and we will come with the Circularity Act next year. Very much, of course, also a link to the environmental agenda overall and to the climate agenda. But I think putting it also in this conversation around competitiveness and sustainable competitiveness, that's probably a little bit new compared to how we discussed about the bioeconomy 5 or 10 years ago. And that's really, really important for us. That brings me to the second point, which is the consistency between policies. This here, we clearly need to work across, and we do that. And the Commission is not always famous for being good at working out of our silos, but here on the bioeconomy is really, really important, because obviously a lot of it with us and DG Environment, but the link to climate policy, LULUCF, I think was, for example, discussed here earlier, super important. The link to energy policies, biofuel, the use of biofuel. A colleague was mentioning, yes, a lot of biomass is being eaten by us, fed to the animals, and of course also used for biofuel, finding the balance there, so working across with the colleagues from DG Energy, and of course also DG Agri, because obviously the agricultural sector being a huge producer of biomass, but of course also an important actor in this economy. So working across to making sure that we have coherent policies here, I think it's something that we're really trying to do with the upcoming strategy. Working across the whole value chain, I think colleagues have been mentioning that, really, really important. We sometimes have this kind of tendency of looking only at the part of the value chain. I think eco-design was mentioned, super important for the bioeconomy, but also if we look more generally to the circularity, we need to not only look about what we do at the end of the chain, waste. We of course want to have, create wealth from waste and all that, but we need to start already with the design. So looking across the whole chain, I think is really important for the bioeconomy as well. Simplification, really important. Big priority of this Commission, as you know. I think that goes very much also for our policies around bioeconomy. My Commissioner is not of the view that every problem in the world needs a new European piece of regulation or directive. Let's look at what's there. Let's make sure that we implement it. Let's see where we can simplify. So that's also something that we are working on. And then maybe just very briefly in terms of the various pillars, if you wish, of the upcoming strategy. I've mentioned the funding/scale-up dimension already, I think. The single market in general, very important for us across the piece right now. The main engine for European competitiveness is making the single market work better. We're all getting excited about tariffs. If we would really get rid of all the barriers in the single market, we would more than compensate for potential tariffs from others. So I think the single market also for the bioeconomy, really important. The third element is, of course, the use of biomass, and other colleagues have been referring to that, how it is a big resource, it's not an infinite resource. How do we make sure that we use it in an intelligent way? At the same time, and also very importantly, we don't think we need, all kind of new rules and regulations and very detailed steering from Brussels on this. But of course, we need to look at what's out there and the various frameworks that we have already. And then fourth element, which I don't think we have touched on yet, which is really important, is the international dimension. From the perspective of the global opportunities for our European companies when it comes to bioeconomy, obviously our forest industry already being big global players, but clearly biochemicals and other areas picking up as well. So that's important. And then, of course, the other side of international cooperation, which is working with other countries, Brazil, for example, being very active in the field of bioeconomy and making sure that we build partnerships and with others. Again, of course, also in a world where multilateral cooperation, multilateral partnerships are maybe not as easy as they used to be. But I'll stop there.
So a very multifaceted approach, coming at it from all these different angles. Reactions to that is what you're hearing, music to your ears in terms of creating those enabling conditions. Christoph, what's your sense hearing that of whether, answer my first question, are they getting the message that you're trying to deliver?
No, I believe the message is there, and there's a lot of initiatives that work in the right way. Yet the whole issue is a bit complicated, and I want to reflect on three things: on the competitiveness, on the circularity, and the energy. So when we talk about competitiveness, it's really about the raw material. We need to have an economic value of the raw material. And we have a lot of cost in the system that is caused by, let's say, sustainability, very often by bureaucracy, that makes the product less competitive. And for instance, if we talk about CO2 certificates for the growth of forests, to put it as a stock there, what do you want to do when you cut the forest? You're incentivizing the industry that is compensating for their carbon emissions with our raw material, and then when you use the raw material, it's going to be penalized. So it's not there yet, but we're in danger that these policies steer us in the wrong direction because they have a very short-term focus. So if a forest, when it grows in the first 30, 40 years, yes, it stores carbon. But what we want to get the stored carbon into the system. That brings me to circularity. Many of the buildings we see here, I don't know the age of this building, but most of the industrial buildings have been built in the past 20, 30 years. These buildings will last another 30 years. There's not yet the time for circularity because it is still stored in buildings. And at the end of the lifespan, we can take out this beam, maybe reshape it, use it in a different building. So there's a huge potential, but we always have to have this long-term perspective. And then I also want to talk about the energy side of biomass. I think the colleague from Latvia said that it's a very important part of the whole value chain, and we have to make sure where it is sensible to use it also as an energy source, and it is very important because every cubic meter which replaces a barrel of oil is a good bioeconomy system, But of course, we have to make sure it's done in an efficient, competitive way. So if you have the sawdust in a sawmill and you make pellets out of that then replaces oil in private homes, that's a very good system. Okay. And the tree just gives us, 60%, 50% of solid material, and the rest is something we have to do about.
So again, addressing that crucial issue of how we combine these different uses of biomass in the way that offers the greatest long-term benefits. And you're suggesting an approach there to evaluating when it's appropriate to use it in energy and when it's not.
Yeah, it's a combination, and it's not a simple answer,
Yeah.
Burn it or don't burn it.
Indeed.
You have to have a holistic view on the whole system, transport cost, for instance. Yeah. There's many things you have to look at.
Okay, thank you very much. Eric, from your perspective and listening to Paulina of those broad lines of this very multifaceted approach, what for you in terms of creating that enabling ecosystem and a long-term, we keep talking about that long-term roadmap, and Paulina, I'll get you to react to that suggestion that sometimes our short focus means we go in the wrong direction. But for you, Eric, what would you be looking for?
Well, first of all, I think referring to indeed what was said, the competitiveness in Europe is crucial, and from that point of view, we have to create a level playing field. So, which indeed triggers us, and I think it's for the European industry quite important to create that level playing field. So it was also mentioned already in the beginning of by Håkan. So where he said, okay, we have to compete with what is imported in Europe. So okay, try to assure that the requirements, sustainability requirements, which we have in Europe, that we imply the same for the imported feedstock. Include that in the free trade agreements. They create barriers potentially for non-sustainable bio-based feedstock. I think that's one element. And then, of course, a discussion which is popping up more and more is, do we have to find a way to indeed open the debate on EU-made, made in Europe? So I think that is an element which is in the Circular Economy Act a point of discussion. It's also a point of discussion in ESPR. If you set targets, okay, is made in Europe, is that an element which you have to include? And I think it's important to open that debate.
Yeah. And that links very much to Paulina's comment about the international dimension, not only focusing on exports, but also in terms of how we're treating imports. Henrik and Anu, and then I'll give you a chance to react, Paulina, in terms of your reaction to what you've heard about the broad outlines of where the Commission is headed and what you would highlight as absolutely crucial here.
I think what we heard is the market approach is a good approach to take. And when we are trying to assess which is the best use case for biomass, it should be decided on the market. And now if we want to direct where the system is heading from a political level, we should be focusing on the markets rather than creating this kind of boxes that, or there's a lot of debate around cascading use of wood. I mean, it's a nice idea to be taken into account in general, but to implement it through regulation, that would bring a whole lot of problems, as mentioned by Christoph. The transportation, where are your forests located, what are the industries close to you, all those aspects. So we should really be focusing on creating incentives on the market for the best use cases, making the innovations the most attractive investments for industries and for investment funds to go to. I mean, if we create the market, the money and the innovation will follow. That's I'm very.
But as you say, business driven.
Business driven.
Not.
Yes.
But policy can help help you make the business case.
It should incentivize the right markets,
Exactly.
the competitiveness of the right markets.
Yeah. Anu, would you add anything in terms of, and particularly perhaps this issue also of scale up, which is something I know the Commission focuses on, has been in fact focusing on for a long time, but it seems to be a conversation that in the past has sometimes gone, if I may say so, Paulina, a little bit round in circles, and how you can help to really make a difference. But what would you pick up on particularly of those issues that Paulina was raising?
Yeah, I was actually not thinking to focus on scale up.
No, focus on whatever you want to focus on.
And as a more overarching element, maybe, and something that actually was Director Paquot who ended his talk by highlighting the importance of MRV, and so monitoring, reporting, and verification, and I would almost add another word as methodologies, because what we see quite often when we look more deeply is that first of all, it may not be wise to replace everything with biomass. It's not given that using biomass for something is always environmentally better, because it is away from somewhere else. And this is something where the methodologies need to be very solid and used to evaluate when is it good to use biomass, when is it better not to use biomass. This is the first point that I think we need to start looking into the future. Another part is that we do need, and especially within forestry, we have seen now that unfortunately the world is changing much faster than we'd maybe hoped for, and faster than we've seen before, much driven by climate change and these both the huge fires we've experienced this summer as well as the bark beetle infestations that we've been seeing already since a decade almost. And here we need to start to be able to monitor these events and what's happening much faster, so that we can take that into account in our planning and in our planning of using the resources, and also preparing them for becoming and being more resilient for the future. Because if we don't have that biomass there, if we don't have those forests there, and if they're not healthy, I can barely see that the economy can be viable.
Thank you very much indeed. So a number of issues and questions, Paulina, around when is it a good use of biomass, the point Anna was just making, and when is it not? And we link that to where is it sensible to use it as an energy source, where does it not make sense? And Henrik saying, the best use case should be decided by the markets. It should be market driven. Your reaction broadly on all of those, and then we'll come back on the other points. Because there's some issues about the made in Europe, so the other side of the global context coin, and this short-term focus which might move us in the wrong direction. And then I would like to come to what we learn from initiatives that we've already seen, and we've already touched on some of them, and how we apply that as we move forward. But Paulina, your reaction on those issues first, if you would.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. Maybe four points briefly on to pick up a few of the points that colleagues have been making. By the way, I agree with a lot of what's being said by other panelists. I mean, starting with the short term versus long term, I can see that, and I think that's a challenge policy in general has, and politics, by the way, in general have. How do you make sure that you don't look only short term today and tomorrow, but also in the longer term? And of course, in a world that's rapidly changing, and as was said, maybe changing more rapidly than we would wish sometimes, it is sometimes difficult to keep that long-term perspective. But I do think it's absolutely crucial. It's crucial for the bioeconomy. It's crucial for the circular economy. It's basically crucial for our sustainability in general. It's crucial also while making this link between sustainability and competitiveness. Because if you look very, very short-term, you could probably say that there is a trade-off, and profits are higher if you ignore the environment. If you look a little bit more long-term, medium-term, it's obvious that the two have to go together. So I think it's a challenge. I hope that what we have done in terms of also setting out the priorities of this commission in the Competitiveness Council, in the Clean Industrial Deal, and I appreciate that these are Brussels bubble strategies, but I think we have tried to at least give a sense of direction, a sense of travel that hopefully gives a little bit more long-term perspective than just the immediate today and tomorrow. Now, on the global level playing field, this is super, super important, and that comes back a lot in all our conversations, in whatever sector you look at. I mean, here we, of course, are in the bioeconomy / forestry, but we see it on steel and aluminium. We see it on plastic and on textiles. You mentioned the sector, there is this issue. And of course, adding to that, trade tensions, tariffs, Chinese overcapacity being sent off to Europe. So I think all these challenges are well understood. That's the good news. The bad news is, of course, that the solutions are not always that easy. We can, of course, look at our trade toolbox, and Commissioner Šefčovič is doing that, of course, and see what can we do to, in a way, protect European markets towards this unfair competition from others. The way we design our rules can help as well. Of course, in general, we say products that enter the European market need to comply with all the European conditions, and then at the same time, we know, of course, that there are products on the market that do not comply with our rules, and then, of course, it's an issue of enforcement and implementation, all the rest of it. So a really, really important challenge, very aware of it, and we are trying to see how we can come with a comprehensive answer, looking from the regulatory side, looking from the enforcement side, looking from the trade policy and trade tool side. But this is a major challenge, which I think we need to be aware of. And that, of course, brings us back also to the conversation about Made in Europe. I think this sits very much in our strategic resilience, strategic autonomy, economic security discussion. A couple of years ago, it would have been unthinkable to have this kind of conversation. Today, I think we have to have it, and of course, as always, trying to find a good balance. The word balance brings me then to the point Christoph was making, and I think you're right. I mean, of course, this is the challenge here. How can we make sure that we foresee these various uses that biomass, of course, have for very legitimate reasons? As you say, I mean, if it's a matter of replacing fossil fuels, and sometimes still from places we don't want to have much contact with if we can avoid it, biofuel obviously makes perfect sense. Does it make sense to burn up everything we could eat instead? Of course not, right? So it's finding that balance. And again, I think the question here is this something that should be very detailedly regulated from Brussels, or rather be left to the markets? I think my boss would be of the view that we need a balance. A lot of this, I think the markets themselves can figure out based on the various practices and standards that are out there already. And no, I think I will leave that at that. Thank you.
Just on that point of uses of biomass, a somewhat provocative comment from someone in our audience who remains anonymous. If we have two chairs, one from plastic and one from wood, maybe the best option is just to remain standing. Comment from the audience, not a question. But Eric, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, not on that one.
No, I just thought I'd throw that into the mix because I rather liked it.
No, I think it's about indeed the market, and it was mentioned that the market should drive. But I think we have also the upscaling element, and if you want to be competitive, then you need a certain level of scale. And for the transition, I think you need indeed to assure that the upscaling creates the business, that you need to have some incentives. And I think indeed at this moment, the market pool for bio-derived, biomass or bio-based products can use some incentives to indeed assure that this business case is created. And then, for example, concrete bio-based targets, which can be set in the ESPR, VAT, lowering VAT for bio-derived products, or green public procurement, also over there. So really use that tool to create or to strengthen or support the business case via upscaling. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to just stay with that for a minute before I move to lessons learned and so on. In terms of incentives that work, from an industry perspective, what really would work? I know he mentioned targets, he's mentioned VAT, green public procurement. What would work, and how can those incentives be provided while avoiding any risk of market distortion at the same time? What do you need, and what do you think doesn't work? Henrik, Christoph, either of you?
Yeah, I think Europe really has all the ingredients that need to be there to become a market leader in bioeconomy. We have the resources, we have the research institutions, and so on. So I would going to invest these institutions, so that we really can become a market leader. We probably lost the race in AI already, but we still can win the race for bioeconomy. So put the resources there. That's one important thing, and the other thing is make as much biomass available to the market as possible. Then it will be competitive, and then let the market and the industries decide where this biomass goes. But increase the availability of biomass in the future. I think that's the biggest task.
Yeah. I very much agree on that point. I mean, if there are new innovative technologies found, and as I said, there was always money who is interested in investing and going into this direction. But if the raw material base is shrinking, then we already have the amount of existing industry who will be fighting for the shrinking raw material base, and that does not leave any room for new innovations, even if the idea is good, because it will be a very protective market, a very harsh competition. So I fully agree on that. And maybe to add or come back for 1 second on the energy question. I very much agree that we should focus on finding better ways to valorize wood than energy. But as long as we haven't solved the energy grid question, this is always the place that people are going to be spending the most money if necessary. We saw it in 2021. You pay whatever is necessary to pay to heat your apartment if there is no alternative. And then this will always outpay all the other industrial processes. So we really need to solve the energy question to free up the wood from there. So but it needs to be solved first. We need to create more supply.
Pointing to an area, Anu, where we need more research and innovation, we need more work. From your perspective, and you already talked about monitoring, but also in terms of other areas we need to focus on from a research perspective, what do you think is going to be really crucial, and how can the EU best support that?
I think one word for that is resilience. We need resilient natural ecosystems, and we need resilient forests. And we need to know if they are resilient or not. And I think that brings the research into play. Do we have the data and the methodologies in place to have a correct picture of what's happening in the world, so that we can then provide that as the basis for developing policies? And just in the past 10, 15 years, we know that a lot of the numbers have changed. And that here, I mean, for example, now the LULUCF reporting numbers, we've seen quite big changes in the numbers when the methodologies improve, and also when data becomes more available because of these climate change-driven big happenings in Europe. And I think this is something that we sort of need to dare to improve, both as researchers, sort of dare to start using new data methodologies when it is better than the previous one, even though that's going to change maybe what we knew. And that needs then to be accepted, and sorry to say that bluntly, but by the policymakers. The policies need to be adaptive enough to have the long-term goal, so that
flexibility that we were talking about earlier.
That when we get better understanding of how things really are, we can adapt while still going towards the right goal.
Okay. Just to follow up on your point about incentives, Eric, I'm going to take a couple of audience questions before we come to lessons learned and where we go. And it goes back to your point about incentives and how to set market-based incentives. Ask the question for bio-based chemicals other than targets, considering they are not yet competitive with petrochemicals. You also talked about TVA, VAT. I love these acronyms that change in each language. And you were also talking about green public procurement. What for you are the most, until you become competitive on price, what will be key, do you think?
Well, I see at this moment the most important role for green public procurement. I think that is, it's driving. It's quite a big and significant part of the market, and it also gives the example. It's indeed. So from that point of view.
So it leads. Paulina, please do react to that, and then I've got a couple of specific questions to you. But you wanted to react to that.
No, just very briefly, not to contradict in any way. I think just generally thinking, we all want to create this enabling ecosystem for the bioeconomy. Clearly, of course, regulation has a role here, and the policy levers we can be looking at and are looking at includes, for example, per procurement. Targets have been mentioned, of course, always come back in this discussion. I think the challenge here, of course, is that we have a quite similar discussion on circularity. And of course, if we say that we want to use per procurement to make sure that we have green target and bio-based targets, we also want to use it to make sure that we have recycling targets. A lot of people say, let's also do some made European, when we are at it. I just mean to think also, how do we just find the right balance between these, there's just so much we can put into the same policy levers. But obviously, all these are issues that we are looking at. And we have, of course, when, again, moving to the circularity, because it really is very similar conversation. Yeah. Of course, we have recycled targets in some piece of legislation already. Some people like it, some don't like it so much. But these are, of course, the policy levers we need to work with. At the same time, I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that it's not going to be only the policymaker and only regulation that's going to make this market happen. We really need a smart mix, I think, of measures here.
A couple of quick fire ones, because then I do want to come to lessons learned. Katarina Ostenberg from FIPRA asks, can you please clarify the rationale for differentiating between primary and secondary biomass? Comes back to an issue that was mentioned earlier. As long as you can assess whether it's sourced sustainably, why differentiate?
I think it's
can anyone help
from...
Anu?
The colleague over here.
Sorry, yeah. In fact, because it goes back to your point earlier about what percentage is primary and secondary. Why differentiate?
Why to differentiate between the different products?
If you know it was sourced sustainably, why differentiate? What's the rationale?
I'm not sure how to frame the question, because if that's for the consumer, it's one question. But I think we're talking more on the overall economic perspective in the society. Yeah. And it's just that, I mean, if, as I said, currently 82% of what we supply in biomass comes directly from nature, and we are burning more than half.
Right.
I think there we could differentiate a bit, that we could try to increase the circularity in the system to relieve the pressure from the environment, given that we are consuming a lot more. So we need more resource, but maybe we can take it from the resource already there, and then it sort of helps us to create a more sustainable society.
Thank you. And another question, to address the lack of sustainable biomass availability that we've been talking about at a competitive price, on top of wood, is the Commission considering looking at other types of feedstocks for biomaterial production, such as food crops? So, I mean, do we need to take this sector within a broader context here as well?
No, absolutely. I think this is a broader context. I think the way we had wanted to, pitch the bioeconomy more generally is indeed to have it in an as broad sense as possible. And that's why I'm mentioning also that it really cuts across, not only in our own area, but also across the policy areas of many others, because this is not, the way we see it, is not limited to only looking at forest and that kind of biomass. It's a much broader approach. Of course, at some point we then also come into some of the biotech issues, which are a little bit less with us, a bit with other colleagues, but it's really taking an as wide approach as possible, and also very much coming back to the point that one of the colleagues were mentioning. I mean, this is clearly an area where we have not lost yet the race between some with some other big international partners. So clearly something that we want to focus on. And I think in order to do so, we absolutely need to take this very kind of big and wide view of the bioeconomy.
Thank you.
And
Henrik, I want to come back to you because you talked earlier from the audience about LULUCF, and you talked about inventing as we go. And I wanted to ask you, and there has been mention of the deforestation regulation. We, of course, have seen it delayed twice. Now we've seen proposals for simplifying in this implementation phase. And we haven't talked about the nature restoration regulation, but all these, we talked about monitoring and, of course, proposals made in that area that have had mixed fortunes in terms of their reception. For you, what lessons do you draw from all of that in terms of, as we look to the new raft of initiatives, making sure, if you think there have been mistakes in the past, we don't repeat the mistakes of the past and we get it right, because time, as has been said, is of the essence to win that race. What will be crucial for you to learn from past experience?
Well, I think the first point being was also mentioned in the chat in the beginning of the day, that the forests, the natural conditions, the socioeconomic conditions, and the history in all the different areas in Europe are very different, and the forests are therefore very different. Therefore, we need quite a decentralized approach in the legislation. It can't be too much into detail, because it will just start creating problems here, problems there. We can never take all the different aspects into account. If we compare just the Baltics and the Nordics, looking from a pan-European level, they seem very similar. But if you go into it, they're very different in the natural sense, in the socioeconomic and the historic sense. The forest is like a history book. As said, today we are harvesting forest that was planted 50 to 100 years ago, and it all has been affected by all the big events that have happened in the past 100 years. And this affects what kind of quality of wood we get from the forest, what tree species we get from the forest, what kind of industry do we have that valorizes the wood. And it creates a very different context when we are trying to now implement the new regulations, where we are coming from, what is the story behind us. And this needs to be taken more into account, and therefore a more centralized approach, and also listening more to the experts who are actually going to be implementing in the field. I think that has kind of was not done definitely enough during the past Commission's period.
So that dialogue is absolutely crucial, and the sort of conversations we've been having here today with Alexandre, with Paulina, really, really vital as we move forward. Christoph, from your perspective, lessons learnt and how we make sure that we get it right in future.
So I have learned a new term today. It's MRV, and I think this is really very, very important, because we discussed these numbers, and when you say 50% of the biomass is being burned, this sounds dangerous, but I think it really is a part of the bioeconomy, and we're on a very dangerous path here. In Germany, for instance, they are remodeling their forests from coniferous forests to hardwood forests, mainly beech. You know what the main use of beech is? It's firewood. Maybe you can have some chemical uses out of beech, but it definitely is very difficult for construction. It's very expensive, it's not competitive, yet the forests have been transformed because everyone says, no, they're more resilient. The coniferous trees that have a problem today with pine beetle and climate change were the trees that our grandfathers have planted 60, 80 years ago. And that was the right decision for that time. And that's what I mean with long-term perspective. We have to find out what are the right trees for in 50 years. Can you tell me what the climate will be in 50 years? No. So that's the difficulty about the forest strategy. And we must diverse it in between regions. In Austria, we have a lot of old-grown forests. There are very big trees that are saturated, not accumulating. So maybe the right forest strategy for Austria could be cutting more forests to create cutting more old trees to create a more resilient forest for the future. And in Poland, where I've heard there's still a huge potential of reforesting agricultural land, that might be a different policy. So it's very, very diverse all across Europe.
Which echoes that point Henrik made at the beginning, and we've made time and time again about that nuance to allow for differentiation, what the EU should do and what it shouldn't, what should be left. That old. We're talking subsidiarity again. I can't believe we're back there, Paulina, but I'll come to you in a moment. But Anu, just to that point about MRV, if you wanted to react, now that he's learned his new term, and Eric, also to you about lessons learned from where we've come from as we move forward. But Anu.
Thanks a lot. I circle it here so you can remember that. Yeah, just to correct myself, actually, when I was talking about the energy and burning it, it was on forest biomass. So of course, for overall the energy use is around 30% of all the biomass. Yes, but actually, I would like to echo a lot of the terms you mentioned here, because we're living in an uncertain world. With the resource, when we talk about forestry, that we need to, when we plant something now, we're looking ahead for 100 years. There's no way to know how the world is. And I think the only way to do the work is to diversify, to try to make sure that we don't put all the eggs into the same basket, and also that we find ways, and I know that the forest industries are quite ahead of this, to find ways to also use, for example, tree species that we weren't able or weren't considering to use before, to try to diversify the industry so that they're not just dependent on a specific type of hardwood or softwood species for their production, but that they could use different kinds, because this makes it, or gives the possibility then for forest owners to invest in different kind of tree species that will tolerate the different risks differently.
Thank you. Someone in our audience also, in relation to this updated methodologies for measuring impacts, asks how can we work together across natural materials to make this happen? So some joined up thinking across the natural materials stage. But Eric, coming back to pick up on that if you want to, but coming back to this issue of lessons learnt from the regulations to date and how we should apply those lessons in the future.
If we look at regulations, then for the bio-based was, and certainly when you look at this to the greenhouse gas accounting, yeah, so if you look at the role that it plays in climate, if you look in the product footprinting, so bio is not really recognized if you bring it into materials. That's what we see in the accounting rules, which are used in the legislation. And I think there it is really needed to assure that, okay, it is recognized. So in the accounting rules, as Christoph also mentioned, so that indeed, it is a valid tool or valid indeed direction to use this material. And in that way, and that is something which is also not only in European legislation, I think you also have to look at the global level, so the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is being revised at this moment. So also over there, focus on indeed the rules. I think the Commission, but also other players have to give input into the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, focusing on what is the revision which is ongoing and how this type of accounting rules are impacting indeed the forestry management and the use of bio-based materials.
Just coming back to the inventing as we go and some of the lessons maybe we learnt from the regulation of the past, what conclusions would you draw, Paulina, from the way we've done it, what we got right and what we didn't get so right? And how is that influencing thinking as we look to these upcoming initiatives?
Well, first, maybe say that I don't necessarily agree that we invent as we go. I mean, well, sometimes maybe we do, but I think in this particular area, we have, of course, been working on the bioeconomy with action plans and strategy in the past. We're not starting exactly from a blank slate here. Now, maybe 3 points from my side in terms of how we can try to be better going forward, because there's always a margin for improvement, obviously. I mean, one is dialogue. I think that's really, really important. We've also try that in this particular bioeconomy context by issuing a call for evidence, which we got a lot of input, and also ourselves participating a lot in meetings with stakeholders, panels and conferences, really trying to gather different perspectives. I think dialogue is absolutely key. The second point where we agree a lot with Christophe and Henrik and maybe others as well is that one size does not fit all. And this is really, it cuts across a lot of policy areas, but I think it's very true when it comes to the bioeconomy. We need to be very mindful of the various local, regional and national context here and recognize that we cannot have exactly the same blueprint for everyone, or rather leaving that kind of flexibility in how things are implemented nationally. And then the third point, and I think that one is really on us, and that is to make sure that our policies are fully coherent and well lined up. Because what I hear often in the bioeconomy field, but the same goes for circularity, is that stakeholders come to see me and say, but I actually have this brilliant solution, but it's very, very difficult for me to get all the necessary approvals, for example, to market it. Or, and I'm coming to circularity again, because it's something we work a lot in, where people say, okay, I have actually found for waste stream X a very good way of recycling and re-extracting the materials, but then I'm up against all kind of barriers coming from other parts of the EU acquis, which means that I can't transport it, I can't cross the border with this waste or whatever. So I think we also, and that's obviously very much for us, also need to make sure that we don't inadvertently ourselves, through our various policies, which of course are there for other very good reasons, but are not always fully lined up, and sometimes I think hinder us a little bit in terms of the kind of scaling up in general that we need to find for both bioeconomy and circularity.
Thank you very much. We are almost out of time, but I want to come back and chart our way forward, if I might. And Christophe said, we've already lost the AI race. How do we make sure? He said, we can win the race for the bioeconomy. And you said, I was interesting as a sort of aside almost, we haven't lost it yet, which sort of echoing, okay, if we don't get this right, we are at risk of losing it as well. So for each of you, and I really quite like, Brussels tends to be, what do you want from her? But I would like to do what I also did with Håkan and Alexandre earlier and ask you, if you had to identify a key next step of all the issues we've talked about over the last hour, for the industry itself, for you guys in the middle, as well as for the policymakers, what would your key next step be? But Anu, let me start with you, and in broader terms, a key next step if we are to really get this discussion about the best use of biomass right, and therefore realize its full potential, but realize it in the best possible way. You talked at the beginning about monitoring. Is that where you would come back to now? For you, is that the central point?
For me, yes, as a researcher, but I'd rephrase it as a holistic assessment. We need to assess our choices in a broad perspective, seeing what are the impacts for the environment, for the economic development, what are the impacts socially. And there might be several different pathways. And that's up to you people to decide where you want to go. But if we don't identify the trade-offs between those or within those different scenarios, then it's difficult to make informed choices. So I'd say this holistic assessment of different pathways is key.
Thank you very much. Christophe, what do you want as a top priority from them and a priority for your own sector?
Well, I have to bring it up now. I think the most priority is we have to get rid of EUDR. Because that has been hindering our sector for the past 2 years to an extent that is unbearable. And the construction error of EUDR is the whole traceability. We cannot make traceability throughout the whole sector. I think we all are on the same line. We have said it today. We are against deforestation. We need more forests. We need more biomass. So we're absolutely on the same side. But we cannot provide traceability through the whole value chain. We can do it at the beginning, at the forestry sector, maybe at the entrance of the sawmill. But afterwards, it's simply not working. Who would come up with the idea to have a liter of gasoline followed back to the source? And they are the responsible for climate change, not the biomass.
Thank you. And
Thank
anything for the industry itself? Keep on innovating, you're going to say.
Of course, but honestly, this is a topic we have been working on. All our resources in lobbying everywhere goes into that. We need that for innovation. We need to liberate the businesses from this bureaucratic era.
Thank you. Henrik.
I will just elaborate on that. It's not only EUDR, it's all the regulations. The amount of regulation that got hit the forest sector in the past 5 years was just too much and too fast. And as Håkan said in the morning, I come from a small country, our businesses are small. That's why we are inventing as we go. We just don't have the capacity to be on top of that. What has it done? It has frozen almost all investments. Nobody is currently investing because they don't understand where we are heading with the raw material base. So some more clarity, certainty, and more listening to the experts.
Thank you very much. Eric?
Well, if we look at the policymakers, I think indeed simplification, of course, is one, but simplification is optimization indeed of the different regulations and harmonization of the different regulations. Triggering and creating the market, I think that is an important element. So market pool measures remain crucial for upscaling to assure. The energy, I think it was mentioned indeed, the challenge to have the competition with energy. Certainly an element which is also in the hands of the Commission, at least not full, but part of it to address this. And if we look at the sector, then I think, okay, innovation, crucial. So it's strong. We are in Europe strong in innovation, but also exchange. So communication throughout the value chain. I think the chemical sector is really seeing a lot of opportunities and needs indeed the different type of biomasses to be considered as indeed input to create the materials. And I think that is important.
Thank you very much. Paulina, I know you mentioned those 3 key areas in your last answer. I don't know whether you would highlight one of them in particular in terms of key next steps, but also, is there anything you would ask for from these guys?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just very briefly on EUDR. I was kind of thinking maybe a panel without EUDR, but no. I mean, I think I said it myself in the beginning. I think simplification is really, really important. Without, of course, undermining any policy objectives. My boss has been in this job now for a year. We have clearly identified that simplification is an important issue. That's why we're working on an environmental omnibus, following a public consultation, call for evidence that we did back in the summer. But also importantly, we really try to always think in terms of simplification. So it's not only about the environmental omnibus, it's also when we design new policies, like the Circular Economy Act, for example, to really try to, let's say, by design, make sure that we don't build in unnecessary complexity. So that is really important. Maybe very briefly on EUDR, I mean, we are aware of the concern. We have put forward a proposal 10 days ago where we precisely have reduced very significantly the burden on the primary producers, the micro and small ones up to 50 employees, which in our assessments, 95 to 99% of forest owners in Europe are small forest owners. That is a discussion now that we hope that Council and Parliament will take forward quickly. So I think we are, we see the challenges and we are trying to act on it. But I do think also importantly, again, going forward to indeed try to already in the design stage of the rules make sure that they are as simple as possible. And for the rest, I think just having this very open and constructive dialogue is very appreciated and important for us.
And we appreciate all of you having such an open and constructive dialogue. Will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for a great discussion? Thank you so much. You may return to the anonymity of the audience, and thank you to you for all your questions and comments. Managed to squeeze quite a lot in, not all of them, but thank you so much for those and for contributing to our discussion. So we are going to close in a few minutes, but first I'm delighted to give the floor to Pierre-Olivier Drège, who is Vice President of UCFF, the Union de la Coopération Forestière Française. Over to you for some final thoughts, Pierre-Olivier.
Yes, good morning. A few concluding remarks after this very interesting discussion. We've had major issues which have been discussed this morning, which have many ideas, some proposals too. And I won't go through all of them, of course, and I'll come back on 2 or 3 ideas, perhaps. First of all, we are confronted with major challenges. The first one, of course, is the climate change, which is affecting all sectors, but which is affecting forestry as a whole and the whole industry. The second challenge is how are we going to meet the targets which have been decided at international level, the Paris Agreement, at European level, becoming carbon neutral, and at national level. So what is obvious after the discussion this morning is that forests globally and the wood-based industries they really do appear as a part of the solution. And they really have a potential to develop the share of what is going to be done, which has to be done. And there is a demand for that. There is a demand for that in the public. There is a demand for that in the economy. And this demand is rising very rapidly. So it's really an opportunity, and we have to seize it. There are some threats, and those are real threats. There are threats on the EU forest, and there are threats, of course, in the global economy too. Fires, drought in the south, storms in the north, beetles and diseases everywhere. And whenever those threats occur, they bring emotion. And when you've got emotion, you've got two ways to cope with that. One way is to say protection. Protection, and that might lead to some ideas like having all the forest driven to free evolution and taking men out of the forest. And this morning we have had really a very different approach, going down another path, which is emotionally leading to action. Leading to action, and the first one, of course, is inside the forest. Developing sustainable, active management of forests. Because this leads both to more resilient forests and at the same time providing renewable material for the industry. And not one or the other, but both at the same time. Then, of course, the second point is to develop the capacity of wood products to substitute to fossil materials in the whole of the economy. And we have had many examples this morning, showing that not only this is possible, but there is a rising demand, and the range of possibility is really opening totally, both in quality and in quantity. And what is it about? In fact, it's about using the sequestration ability of forest of sequestration of carbon, but not only as a carbon sink, but as a carbon pump. A carbon sink, you are just waiting to put the thing in a well, and it should stay there forever. Carbon pump is the idea is to get it to outside, produce something else, and this is what forest management is about. But to do that, we need efficiency. We need competitiveness. We also need to have a market-orientated approach. And so you asked in the beginning to Alexandre Paquot, and you ask at the end to the panelists, what do we need? The first thing we need is a recognition, an explicit recognition of the substitution ability potential of wood in the building activity, and this is obvious. In the packaging, this is rising up. And also in other innovating areas like textile and all that. And also in energy with the byproducts. We have to, for that, there is another need, is to reduce the administrative burden. It has been said at the end of the panel, and this is very important. Simplification is not only for the other sectors, it's not only for agriculture, but also for forestry. So this is what the Forest Coalition and the 10 partners which are on the board is about. Building proposal in that orientation. So thanks to all of you for attending this morning discussion. Thanks to the speakers and panelists, to our moderator. Thanks to the Commission, and of course the 10 members of the Forest Coalition, and a special word for FAM and the CEO Håkan Buskhe, and of course Magnus and all the team which had made possible to organize this event. Thank you very much.
Very great thanks also to you, Pierre-Olivier, for encapsulating our discussion so eloquently. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. I wish you a very pleasant rest of the day, and as a miracle in Brussels, the sun is shining on you. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.